That bottle sitting on your counter right now sits somewhere on a 5-rung ladder that runs from highway exit handles to $10,000 auction lots, and most drinkers have no idea which rung they're standing on. The industry loves that confusion. They've spent decades blurring the lines between honest $20 juice and overhyped $50 bottles, between craft and corporate sleight of hand, between scarcity and manufactured hype. The average enthusiast wastes hundreds a year chasing labels that pour worse than the bottles 2 tiers down. Today, I'm walking you through all 5 levels, naming names, prices, and corporate parents. Level 5 will surprise you. Level 2 will reframe your liquor cabinet completely. Here's the thing about bourbon pricing in 2026. It barely correlates with what's in the glass. Bottles get marked up because of allocation games, secondary market hype, fancy boxes, and corporate parent decisions made in conference rooms in Louisville, Frankfurt, Paris, and London. Each rung operates by different rules. What works at level 2 will get you fleeced at level 4. Different rungs, different rules. Different traps. Level 1 is the gas station shelf. The bottom rung, $10 to $20 a bottle, often sold in plastic handles that catch the fluorescent glare of a convenience store cooler at 2 in the morning. This is where you find Rebel from Lux Row Distillers at $15. Ancient Age, a Sazerac product distilled at Buffalo Trace, sits at $12 to $16. Evan Williams Black Label from Heaven Hill lands around $18. Heaven Hill White Label hits at $13. Old Crow, a Beam Suntory throwback, runs about $11. Benchmark Old No. 8, another Sazerac product, lands at $14. Early Times, now owned by Sazerac after Brown-Forman sold it off, hovers around $16. Jim Beam White Label runs around $17. What you're getting at this tier is honest, young, 4-year-old bourbon at the legal minimum proof requirements, often 80 proof, sometimes pushed to 86. The labels look like they were designed in 1987 and never updated, which is honest in its own way. What are you actually paying for at level 1? Glass, label, federal, excise tax, distribution markup, and a thin margin of liquid. The juice itself probably costs the producer $2 to $4. The packaging budget is essentially zero. No brand mythology, no master distiller signature, no wax dip. The nose pours flat and grain forward, with a faint corn sweetness, a whisper of oak, and a sharp grain edge that hits the back of your throat fast. Acetone in the background sometimes. Wet cardboard finish. The mouthfeel is thin, almost watery, like iced tea cut with rubbing alcohol. The finish disappears before you can name it. But here's where I have to be honest with you. For mixing into a highball, for pouring over crushed ice on a Tuesday in July, for cooking a glaze on a pork shoulder, this tier earns its keep. The Heaven Hill White Label in particular is a Kentucky local secret, bottled in bond at 100 proof. Benchmark Old No. 8 is essentially baby Buffalo Trace from the same mash bill. My honest verdict on level 1? Not embarrassing if you know what you bought. Just do not pour it neat for guests unless those guests have done something to deserve it. Now let's climb to level 2. The smart, everyday tier, $25 to $45. This is where bourbon starts to make sense as a drink, and not just a delivery system. Wild Turkey 101, distilled by the Russell family for Campari Group, lands around $28 and pours at 50.5% ABV. Old Grandad 114, the high-proof bonded cousin from Beam Suntory, runs about $32 at 57%. Buffalo Trace, when you can find it on shelf at suggested retail, costs about $30. Maker's Mark, owned by Beam Suntory, sits around $35. Four Roses Small Batch, owned by Kirin Holdings of Japan, hits $40 in most markets. Add Wild Turkey Rare, breed at $55, Evan Williams bottled. In bond at $18, Larceny from Heaven Hill at $28, Bullet from Diageo at $30, 1792 from Barton at $30, and Old Forester 100 at $26. The shelf at this tier is deeper than most drinkers realize. What's available at level 2 changes everything. You're getting honest, higher proof juice. You're getting recipes refined for 50, 80, sometimes over 100 years. The Russell family has been making wild turkey since the 1950s. The old Grandad mash bill has stayed essentially unchanged since Prohibition repealed. You're paying for distillery character, the master distiller's signature, the Rick House climate cycles, and a bottle that has not been chill filtered into anonymity. The nose on Wild Turkey 101 carries dark cherry, baking spice, and a soft pepper warmth that builds slowly. Makers gives you wheat softness and a creamy texture that coats the mouth like warm caramel sauce. 4 Roses. Small batch lands floral and bright, with apricot and a delicate rose petal lift you do not get anywhere else. Buffalo Trace opens with brown sugar and butterscotch, settles into toasted almond and a kiss of mint. Old Grandad 114 pours hot and unapologetic, rye forward, with black pepper and clove. Larceny brings honeyed wheat and toasted vanilla. Bullet pulls a higher rye recipe with cinnamon snap and dry oak. 1792 leans nutty with toasted pecan. Old Forester 100 brings green apple skin and light maple. The proof points here were chosen deliberately, not pulled down, to 80 for marketing softness, but held at 50, 57, even 60% because the distillery believes the whiskey deserves it. Most of these bottles are not chill filtered. The packaging is modest. The markup is paying for time, mash bill quality, real cooperage, and a master distiller who actually tastes batches. Not for a foil-wrapped tube. My honest verdict on level 2, this is bourbon doing its job. For 90% of drinkers on 90% of nights, this tier is the answer. Listen carefully because I'm coming back to that thought. Level 3 is enthusiast territory, $50 to $120. The price doubles, sometimes triples, from level 2. The question is whether the liquid doubles in quality. Sometimes yes, sometimes nowhere close. At this tier you find Knob Creek Single Barrel Reserve at 55, a Beam Suntory product at 60% ABV with a 9-year age statement. Russell's Reserve 10-year, another Campari product, runs 45 to 55. Woodford Reserve Double Oaked from Brown-Forman lands around 65. Eagle Rare 10 costs 40 to 50 at sticker, but trades at 70 plus. Henry McKenna Single Barrel 10-year bottled in bond from Heaven Hill runs around 50. Elijah Craig Barrel Proof lands at 70. Booker's hits 85 to 90. Blanton's Original, distilled at Buffalo Trace, suggests 65, but routinely sells for 120. What's available at level 3 is single barrel selection, longer aging, special finishing techniques. You're paying for time in oak, for the warehouse real estate. That bottle occupied for 9, 10, sometimes 12 years, while it lost evaporation to the angels and gained color and weight from the staves. Knob Creek Single Barrel pours dense and dark, with toasted brown sugar, charred oak, leather, and a long warming finish that fades into pipe tobacco and espresso. Russell's Reserve 10 brings rich vanilla, dried fig, and a soft cinnamon heat that settles into your chest the way a wood stove settles a kitchen. Eagle Rare 10 pours leaner and more elegant, with toffee and orange peel and a clean, dry finish. Booker's drinks like a campfire wrapped in butterscotch, hot and rolling. Blanton's gives you honey, citrus zest, and a touch of nutmeg. Henry McKenna brings cherry cola and bonded backbone. Woodford Double Oaked layers maple syrup over toasted hazelnut. Elijah Craig Barrel Proof rolls in heavy with dark caramel and cocoa nib. Have you ever poured a glass of Russell's 10 next to a $50 single malt and watched the bourbon win? It happens. Often. In my assessment, this tier is where you start paying real money for incremental differences. The jump from level 2 to level 3 buys you about 30% more complexity for 150% more cost. That math gets worse as you climb, not better. This is also where store pick programs live. A well-chosen Russell's Reserve store pick at $55 can pour like a level 4 bottle. Build a relationship with a store you trust, and this tier opens up considerably. The packaging starts mattering here too. Heavier bottles, embossed glass, longer corks, sometimes a paper hang tag listing barrel and warehouse data. Some of that markup pays for genuine warehouse aging. Some pays for the heavier glass. The honest split sits about 60-40 in the liquid's favor, which is still a reasonable trade. Honest verdict on level 3? Worth it for special occasions, gift bottles, or the back of the bar pour you nurse for 3 hours on a Friday night. Not worth it as your daily drinker, unless you have generational wealth or no children to feed. Now we climb into the strange air of level 4. Allocated and limited bottles. $150 to $500 at suggested retail, frequently double or triple that on the secondary market. This is where bourbon stops being a beverage and starts being a hunt. The Buffalo Trace Antique Collection, often shortened to BTAC, includes George T., McStagg, William LaRue Weller, Thomas H. Handy, Sazerac Rye, Eagle Rare 17, and Sazerac 18. Suggested retail runs $150 to $190 per bottle. Actual retail, if you can find one, runs $500 to $2,000. Four Roses Limited Edition. Small batch suggests $180 and trades around $400. Old Forester Birthday Bourbon, a Brown Forman release each September, suggests $130 and clears $300 plus. Heaven Hill. Heritage Collection bottles run $200 to $300 at suggested retail. Michter's 10-year bourbon suggests $150 and sells for $300. Parker's Heritage Collection from Heaven Hill, honoring the late master distiller Parker Beam, suggests $150 and trades up. What you're actually paying for at level 4 is artificial scarcity wrapped around genuinely interesting liquid. The juice in BTAC is real. George T. Stagg, when you taste it at full barrel proof, pours like liquid leather and burnt orange peel and dark chocolate ganache, with a heat that builds in waves that crest minutes after the swallow. Weller is weeded and dense and almost sticky on the palate, with stone fruit and a finish that holds for half a minute. Eagle Rare. 17 drinks like aged cognac trapped in a bourbon body, dried tobacco, and old polished leather. Thomas H. Handy hits sharp and peppery with a long mint and anise close. Sazerac 18 pours older, drier, with sandalwood and faint salinity. The packaging now includes embossed boxes and bottles, designed to look like collectibles before you even open them. The problem is that Sazerac releases roughly 7,000 to 10,000 cases of each BTAC bottle annually, against demand that runs 5 to 10 times that. Bottles get allocated to liquor stores by Sazerac's wholesalers, then those stores either raffle them, gift them to regulars, or list them at 3 to 4 times suggested retail. Here's a pattern break worth remembering. Up until about 2015, you could walk into a decent Kentucky liquor store every October and buy a Stag off the shelf at sticker price. That world is gone. Pappy Van Winkle used to sit on shelves too. Then Anthony Bourdain mentioned it on television. The secondary market exploded, and an entire flipper economy was built on top of bottles. That used to be a curious side product of the Stitzel-Weller distillery legacy. The market has not corrected since. Honest verdict on level 4. The liquid is excellent, often exceptional. The buying experience is broken. If you find one at suggested retail through a store you trust, buy it. If you're paying secondary, you're funding the flipper class, not rewarding the distillery. And now we reach level 5, the trophy tier, the auction tier, $1,000 to $10,000 and beyond. Pappy Van Winkle, 23-year, the unicorn of the modern era, suggests around $300 at retail and trades for $3,000 to $5,000. Old Rip Van Winkle, in its various age statements, distributed by Buffalo Trace under license from the Van Winkle family, ranges from $1,000 to $3,500 on secondary. Michter's 25-year bourbon, when released in extremely small batches, by Chatham Imports, lists around $1,500 and clears $5,000 at auction. The legendary A.H. Hirsch, 16-year, distilled in Pennsylvania at the now-defunct Michter's Distillery in Schaefferstown in the 1970s and bottled in the 90s, now trades anywhere from $4,000 to over $10,000 for sealed gold foil bottles in original presentation boxes. Add Old Fitzgerald bottled in bond decanters from Heaven Hill, clearing $500 to $1,000. Add Willett Family Estate single barrel at old age statements, sometimes pushing $2,000 at auction. What's actually available at level 5 is liquid that is, in many cases, genuinely beautiful. Poppy 23 pours a deep mahogany, aromatic, dried apricot, sandalwood, brown, butter, dark molasses, smoke from a fire that burned out hours ago. The palette is layered in a way the lower tiers simply cannot match because they have not had 2+ decades in oak to develop those tertiary notes. The leather, the polished wood, the suggestion of an old library on a rainy afternoon, the faint salinity that long-aged bourbon sometimes pulls from oxidation through the bunghole. Compare that to the wet cardboard finish of a level 1 bottle, and you understand the spectrum this category covers. AH. Hirsch carries a dusty signature no modern bourbon can replicate because Pennsylvania-style mash bills with that particular yeast strain in those specific warehouses simply do not exist anymore. The distillery is gone. The yeast is gone. Each bottle is a finite artifact from a closed chapter of American distilling history. The packaging at this tier becomes part of the asset. Hand-numbered crystal decanters, wooden presentation boxes lined with velvet, certificates of authenticity printed on letterpress paper. What are you paying for at the trophy tier? Collectability, scarcity, story, status signaling, packaging as artifact. And yes, some of the most complex liquid bourbon has ever produced. The brand mythology becomes inseparable from the liquid itself. The Pappy Van Winkle name carries cultural weight that no $20 bottle could ever accumulate, no matter how good the juice was. In my honest assessment, the value proposition collapses entirely at this tier when measured in dollars per drinking experience. A $2,000 bottle does not deliver 100 times more pleasure than a $20 Wild Turkey 101 highball on a hot porch in August. It cannot. Pleasure does not scale that way. But for collectors, for serious enthusiasts who treat bourbon the way some people treat vintage watches or first edition books, the collectability justifies the spend in a way that has nothing to do with what the liquid tastes like. Honest verdict on level 5? Not for me. Probably not for you either. But I am not going to call it a scam, because for the people who buy at this tier with eyes wide open, the bottle is doing exactly what they want it to do. It is a trophy. The drinking is incidental. The story is the point. So which tier represents the real sweet spot for most drinkers? Let me be direct. Level 2, $25 to $45. Wild Turkey 101, Old Grandad 114, Buffalo Trace at sticker, Maker's Mark, Four Roses, Small Batch, Larceny, Bullet, Evan Williams. Bottled in bond, $17.92, Old Forester 100. That is where price to pleasure peaks for 90% of drinkers 90% of the time. You are paying mostly for liquid, not for packaging or mythology. If I could only own 3 bottles for the year, my pick would be Wild Turkey 101, Buffalo Trace, and Four Roses Small Batch. 3 bottles, under $100 combined, covers 90% of every pour you'd want to make. Level 3 earns occasional visits for special pours, anniversary nights, or the gift bottle you bring to a friend. Level 4 earns a chase only if you enjoy the chase itself. Level 5 is for collectors who understand exactly what they're buying. And Level 1 earns its rightful place in the cocktail shaker, the cooking glaze, and the late night pour you don't want to overthink. The bourbon industry desperately wants you to believe that climbing the ladder is the path to enlightenment. That you graduate from level 2 to level 3 to level 4 like you're advancing through grades in school. The truth is messier. The truth is that a perfectly poured glass of Russell's 10 on a cold November night will deliver more genuine satisfaction than a hoarded Pappy bottle that sits unopened on a shelf for 3 years because you're afraid to drink it. Bourbon was meant to be poured, not displayed, not flipped, not photographed for social media and resealed. So look at that bottle on your counter again. Ask yourself what you actually wanted from it. If the answer matches what's in the glass, you bought right. If not, you now know which rung to climb to, or back down from. The smartest drinkers I know spend most pours in level 2, take occasional level 3 excursions, treat level 4 as a once-a-year treat when they find one at sticker, and either ignore level 5 or budget for it the way other people budget for vacations. Build your own ladder. Climb only when the climbing is worth it. The best pour you'll have this year is almost certainly hiding behind a $30 price tag on a regular store shelf in a bottle no one is fighting over. Find it, open it, pour something honest tonight, and let the marketing departments shout themselves hoarse without you. The latter was never the point, the pour was.